Hi, guys. Welcome to Dead by Tomorrow interviews. My name is Daniel Winter, and my co host is Andrew Monroe. As we explore different topics that are worth thinking about today, we want to bring in guests to share their own unique perspective. We hope you enjoy hearing from our guests as much as we enjoy talking to them.
Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to Dead by Tomorrow. We have yet another special guest. We have been decking out the interviews for 2021. Stephen Mobley, a friend from college, actually, which is a new type of interview we've had. Most everybody that we've had on so far has been an old friend, and I've known Stephen for a while, but it's definitely a different flavor than the usual Emerald people we've had on. Stephen, welcome. We are very excited to hear everything from trains and fathers and who knows what else. So how's it going?
It's going pretty well. Glad to finally join you. I've been following you guys, read your book, and pretty excited to just talk about who I am, what makes me, and actually how you guys have helped me get here.
Ooh, I love it. Finally, someone who appreciates the glory that is Andrew and Daniel's podcast. I can quote you on that, right?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay?
So we talked about this on our last episode. Normally it's kind of like who knows who goes first, but because we did that, now we gotta, we can't let people think they know what's about to happen next. So Daniel, what you got for Stephen?
I think I can tell what's actually happening here, Andrew. It's just you feel really nervous about asking our guests the first question, so you just try to find a way to kick it over to me. But that's fine. I don't mind. I can take the pressure. So, Stephen, I haven't seen you in a long time. I think the last time, and one of the few times, was probably actually hiking in Paladaro Canyon. I don't know if you remember that. The Trail to Mordor, is that ringing any bells?
It does. That's one of my favorite trails, and I live in the Northwest now, and it's still one of my favorite trails. And I definitely remember that hike. That was, I think, the first and maybe only time we've met. Maybe one other time.
That's kind of what I'm thinking as well. So,
were y'all not at Hammer Sunday together one time? I feel like y'all were in town both on that weekend, or was it maybe?
It's possible.
You would remember me as the guy laying on the ground during most of Hammer Sunday.
I mean, to be fair, that was a lot of people, so...
You might have been right. Y'all might have been split by a couple weeks. I can't remember.
Anyway, yeah, so the Trail to Mordor is a little bit more of, I would say, kind of a thrill-seeking type of hike. And so is that more your MO when it comes to hiking? Like, thrill-seeking, want to do something where you're maybe jumping over a crevasse? Or is it more, I'm just going to say, calm-seeking when it comes to outdoor adventures? Where would you label yourself?
Definitely on the thrill-seeking side. Like I said, I live in the Pacific Northwest now. I'm in Oregon. So there's really good hiking. And there's a few people who want to go see waterfalls, and you just walk in a circle looking at waterfalls. And those are really cool because we don't have those in Texas. But honestly, I want to conquer a mountain. To do that, sometimes you got to jump over a crevasse,
It is nice whenever you put your life on the line for something that doesn't matter. You feel really good about it.
Definitely, yeah. When I have an option when I'm hiking to either go up the rock face or around the trail, I'm definitely taking the rock face because what a much better story.
Yes, absolutely. We need to hike more. Okay, so you're in Oregon now. I assume you've gotten to get out and do a lot of hikes, because I've been to Portland once and it was super cool. There was a lot of beach and hiking sort of stuff. So have you found any new favorite hiking spots, anything that Andrew and I should go check out?
Yeah, probably the biggest hike I've done since I moved here was South Sister. I did that in April, and it was still covered in snow. The mountain's about 9,500 feet, so it's not like super tall Colorado mountains, but you definitely start at a lower elevation. And it was just an incredible hike. I mean, you're in the high desert in Central Oregon, and you climb to the top of this essentially volcano, and you cross over through the crater at the top of the volcano, and you stand up on this huge rock overlooking this just wide open plain with other volcanoes in it and not a lot of trees. It's really rocky and rugged, and it brings out something primal in you just to be there and have conquered that volcano.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Volcanoes, another thing that, to my knowledge, I don't think we really have in Texas. There's probably some in New Mexico, but not in Texas. And so you said that's in Central Oregon. Where do you fly into to go there? Do you just hike, or do you camp? What do you do at Second Sister?
Yeah, you could fly into Bend, which is the main city there in Central Oregon. It's also only about 3.5, 4 hours from Portland. So you could fly into Portland and easily drive, which is what we do. That one we did a day hike. planning to do, so there's 3 volcanoes in a row right there, South Sister, Middle Sister, and North Sister. This year, actually, we're going to do an overnight to Middle Sister, which is a little more difficult. And then I think later in the summer, we're going to do, at least I'm planning on doing, I'm hoping a few friends will come with me, a 4-night hike over in northeastern Oregon.
That's awesome. I was just about to ask if you've done a lot of backpacking. And so is that a regular thing, or is this going to be one of your first backpack adventures?
This will be my first backpack adventure. So, growing up in Texas, nobody really wants to be in that heat for that long. After I got here, I started getting into hiking. And in this last year, I was like, you know what? I think it's worth it. I'm going to start spending the money on it, because there's a lot of investment to get the tent. You got to get the lightweight tent, the bag, good boots, all the gear that goes along with it. So started making that investment this year.
Yeah, I most recently backpacked in Idaho at the Sawtooths with some friends, and that was an amazing experience. Idaho is one of those places, you've definitely got to check out because you're in Oregon. It's not that far away. I don't think a lot of people really go, but it was incredible. We got to go through kind of some of these passes that hadn't been crossed yet that season, just because the snow was still pretty high. And so there were a couple spots where we were the first ones to do it. And there were a couple spots where we're hiking and we saw, there was an avalanche here this season. We're hiking through all of this fallen pine through an avalanche field. And it's just stuff that you can't do unless you're willing to pack on all of that gear, spend a few nights out in the remote areas. And so I'm pumped for you, because obviously we both love hiking. And I think hiking is really cool. And then backpacking is just that level up of an experience.
Y'all are getting me all hot and bothered here, man. I want to go hiking.
Idaho has been on my list. I've got a friend, they were living here and they just moved back to Idaho. They're up by Coeur d'Alene, and some of the places he talks about just sound incredible. And so definitely on my list to go to Idaho.
All right, guys, before we get too deep into becoming a hiking podcast, and you think Steven's just a pretty voice and a face, if you can imagine a voice with a face there, he actually is an engineer turned train guru, I guess would be a way. And by train, I mean choo-choo trains, the big ones that you see on railroad tracks.
Wait, what other trains would you be talking about? Just sorry to interrupt there, but I want to clarify.
Whenever it comes across audio, I figured people would be like, train, Andrew likes sports, maybe, Steven's a pretty face hiking. Maybe they thought he'd be like a PT or something like that and training people. Or...
Oh, you're talking about literally physical training. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I was worried that might come across because so far we've just talked about hiking stuff and Steven sounds like a really big, strong, burly man. And little do they know that he's a big, strong, burly man who also has the voice of an angel.
I was wondering where that was going.
And then naturally, train guru is something that you use when talking about, I don't know, a person you go see in the gym.
Oh, yeah, that's what I want to be called if I ever help anybody with a workout. I expect my title to be train guru or train master, which is a title that Steven's held.
Yeah.
What was up with that, by the way? Why? Give us the rundown on your career, because, we like to talk about jobs here because that's what half the people care about. So what happened when you got, I think, a mechanical engineering degree, right?
Civil, actually.
Dang it, civil. I was there. You got a civil engineering degree, and then you took a left turn.
Yeah, it was a hard left, actually. So I got my civil engineering degree, which for those of you that don't know is specifically to anything that has to do with construction, water purification. My focus was in transportation, which is roadway design, railway design, pavement, things like that. So my senior year, I went to the Texas Tech Job Fair, and it was specific to engineers. So I assumed everybody there, all the recruiters there, knew that I was an engineer. And we have little name tags that say Stephen Mobley, civil engineer. And I'm going through talking to different people and come across the booth it's actually 2 booths. They had a bunch of people there for BNSF, which is one of the largest railroads in North America. And so I thought, hey, I could talk to them about rail design, and started talking to one of the recruiters. He asked me what my focus was, and I said transportation. And I thought he knew what that meant because he's at the engineering job fair. But to him, in the world I'm in now, that means operations. So actually operating the train and management of that. And so he goes, oh, let me put you in touch with our transportation recruiter. And so I went over, talked to this guy, John, and John was like, oh, you know what? Let me tell you about this position. And I was like, hold on, this is not what I thought this was. So we kind of laughed about like the miscommunication. He goes, let me tell you about the job. And so he tells me about this opportunity, and it's a management trainee position. So essentially they bring me in, train me for about a year, learning the railroad, learning the business, learning how to be a decent manager. And then they kick you out and you're now in operations management. And I was like, that's not really what I'm looking for. And he goes, yeah, but just so you know, there's opportunity to move up. You could always go back to engineering. And this is what you start out with pay wise. And I was like, oh, now I'm interested, because it paid a lot more than an engineering position would.
Hold on. Let me ask you a personal question then, real quick. What is the expected pay for an engineer coming out of school versus what is the expected entry level pay for BNSF?
Yeah. So at the time, an entry level civil engineer, I probably would have made somewhere between $45,000 and $55,000 coming out of school. Civil's definitely on the lower end of pay scale for engineers. Well, that's definitely entry level, right? Like project managers make a lot more.
Which that's still a chunk of money.
It's still good. It's still really good pay, but BNSF offered me essentially 62 during the training. And then by the time I finished training, they actually went through like a review of what they were paying people at our level. And they raised the entire Trainmaster, which was my title. They raised everybody's pay up to over $90,000. And so
that is nice.
It was very nice. And it's hard to say no to that, even if it has nothing to do with your education. That's how I got into being a Trainmaster.
Okay. Sorry to just have distracted you there. I thought that'd be good context for everybody. So you jumped over to BNSF, and then where has that led you with Trainmasters and whatnot?
Yeah. So Trainmaster is essentially a manager, a frontline manager. My goal was to join BNSF. I worked in the largest yard that we had in the US. And so you can imagine it like a hub for an airport. Trains come in, we break those trains apart. Cars go getting put on different trains, and then they go to their final destination. It's sort of like a hub for an airport where people get off one plane, get on another, and go to their final destination. My goal was to learn the business, do that for a few years, and then get promoted into something else. Making gobs of money. I was pretty happy with that. And so like right out of school, never thought I'd be making that, and started doing the training program, was really enjoying like this new world that I didn't know anything about, learning a lot. And after I got into the position, realized that it was just a grind. It was pretty horrible managing some of these people, the deadlines that were put on us. It just was not a good fit for my kind of lifestyle, my personality. In fact, when I got there, they told me that BNSF stands for Better Not Start a Family, because everybody gets divorced. So yeah, I did that for almost 5 years, and I had gotten turned down for a couple promotions and basically said, you know what, I'm going to look for something else. This is not good for my family. This is not good for me. Personally, it was really weighing on me. I turned into someone that I wasn't. My temper was out of control. I was really short with not just people at work, but like my wife and my kids. It was taking a lot of time away from my home life, really demanding hours. And so it just was time for a change. And that's kind of how I got out of BNSF and started looking for other jobs.
I feel like there's this dynamic that comes up a lot with work. And it sounds like you might have fallen prey to this, where in a career, a lot of times our jobs get the best of us. And when I say the best of us, like literally it gets your attention, your best efforts, and all of those sorts of things. And then what is left over sort of goes to your family. They're getting the tired, worn out version of yourself. I commend you being able to recognize that was the case and trying to be able to find something different. And so do you feel like now in the position you're in, you're equipped to be able to sort of give your best back to your family?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I got the job that I'm in now, I took this position intentionally trying to get away from where I was at. And so, like you're saying, I definitely became aware of shorting my family, that they should be my first priority above work. And so by taking this job, that was really a big factor in that, especially because I'm now working at a transit agency. I work for TriMet, which it's taxpayer funded. It's not necessarily government, but it's paragovernment. And so there's certainly a difference in outlook on what you're expected to give. And I think it's actually a healthy balance here. So I'm much happier where I'm at. I'm much more able to give my family priority over work.
And what did you have to sacrifice anything to be in a spot where you could connect more with your family? Is it something you had to sacrifice, like pay or moving, or how did that look?
Yeah, so I've been here a little over 3 years now, and I still haven't gotten back to the pay I was at BNSF just after the first year I was at BNSF. There was definitely a sacrifice to be made there. We had just bought a house 6 months before I found this job. And so really just buying a house and then turning around and selling it was a pretty big financial hit for us. So between the two, I definitely lost out on some money. But we also moved to Portland, which is quite a bit more expensive to live here than it is in Kansas City. Just the cost of living, the cost of housing. And so certainly had to be willing to give some of that up, but it's definitely paid back tenfold just in time with family, personal relationships.
That's awesome. For people who, even Daniel, what do you do now? What's your title? Who are you working for?
So I work for TriMet. It stands for Tri-Metropolitan. We're the regional transit agency in Portland, Oregon. So we have buses, we have light rail, which is what I took a position for. So I was a manager or an assistant manager over the light rail system. So I had operators underneath me. We did a lot of safety stuff, worked with the union. And then about a year ago, I took a promotion as the manager of streetcar. And so I'm still a rail manager, but the streetcar is actually owned and operated by the city of Portland. And they contract out our employees for operators and maintenance. They supervise, they do the day-to-day management, and I'm more of the oversight from TriMet for our employees. I do the liaison work between the two agencies, work on some contract issues, work with our union to make sure that we're in compliance with them, safety initiatives, things like that.
Nice, man. I dig it. Okay, so before we continue down the train path, which I feel like there's a pun there, but as we've discussed, puns are dumb. So, and I'm saying that because I know Steven loves puns.
I'm hurt.
You get along with everybody else that's been on this podcast.
I think it just takes a lot of training to love puns.
Jesus, I'm out. Y'all have fun with this.
Can't escape it, Andrew. Can't escape it.
I don't know why. Okay.
Sorry, I derailed us there.
Hey, conduct yourself, Steven. Conduct yourself.
Yeah, I'm leaving. Y'all, this is now y'all's podcast. Y'all have fun. I'm gonna go become a hermit. I talked to you a little bit ago, and you mentioned it on the podcast, and we're still at the beginning of the year, so you talked about kicking your goals into gear and kind of the book helping you and some of the stuff. So I thought I would see what did you actually decide that you're kicking into gear? What kind of goals, resolutions are you working on? And what in particular kind of gave you that kick? Was there a certain part of the book? Was it you had a convergence of events in the universe and you're like, this blog, this movie, and then I read this one line in your book and I was like, it was all the same thing? Or what was the situation?
Yeah, it was definitely the only line I read in your book. No, I'm just kidding.
You just opened it and you're like, oh, that's what I needed.
No.
Dead by tomorrow. Oh, shit.
It was definitely... So I mentioned moving away from BNSF and moving here with an intention of realigning my priorities. And we've been here for 3 years. I haven't mentioned this yet, but a part of realigning my priorities is my faith. And that was one thing that BNSF really, I guess I struggled with when I was there, was because we had weird schedules because of the environment that I was in. I really felt disconnected with my faith. I wasn't able to connect with other people, just like in a corporate setting at church. I wasn't able to connect with a lot of believers because it's a very secular organization, or I guess the industry is very secular. And so that was a major part in trying to get away from that. Was I felt like I had to reconnect in a spiritual sense with God and with that community. And so when we moved here, one of my major goals was to find that community again and find people that could pour into my life, like mentors and people that I could walk alongside with. And so I'd been doing that for the last few years. And I think I just didn't have a good direction. I was just stumbling forward looking for how do I make this happen. And so, I was able to, because I know you, I was able to get your book a little bit early and actually finished it prior to the new year, and just thought, I don't set a lot of goals, but throughout your book, you're talking about having a clear vision for what's ahead, setting goals, and you get to the end, you go through some of those questions, and I found myself struggling to answer some of the questions at the end of the book. And so I just talked to my wife and I said, hey, let's sit down. Let's do goals this year. I don't ever make goals. I've never actually made I've made New Year's resolutions, but I've never made goals for the year. It's just not my style. And so I sat down and I did it. And as I worked into it, I thought, man, there's a lot of stuff I want to do. this is really good to just write it down and to be able to see it in front of me and hold myself accountable to it. Yeah, that, the questions at the end of your book, I think really spurred me towards that. But just the mindset throughout the whole thing was like being prepared to seize what's in front of us. And how can you seize what's in front of you if you don't know what you're trying to grab?
I swear we didn't pay him to say this. Like, but no, that's really good because it is. If you don't have a plan, there was a quote, and I think we've said it before, but a goal without a plan is a dream. And that's the same thing as resolutions. If you're like, hey, I want to get in better shape, I want to make more money, and that's where it ends, you're just wishing. That's what it is. It has something to do with wishing. I'll throw it in the show notes. Like, you're just wishing for something if you don't actually have a plan on how to accomplish it, because that's how it works. If you don't have your roadmap, it's really hard to make yourself do the stuff that is right there that day. You don't have the motivation to take that small step forward because in your mind, you're like, well, here's this thing I want. And at some point, I'm just going to reach out and take it, or it's going to happen to me. And as soon as you make that plan, it's, oh, I've got to take this step and I've got to take this next step. And there's all these building blocks that go into it. And you're like brick by brick building this wall. And a lot of people just want a wall and they don't really recognize that you've got to do all of these things that involve building that wall. It's a singular object, not all the small parts that build up to this sum. So I'm glad that helped.
I'm the king of procrastination, and my other struggle is apathy. So those moments when I do feel that tug to better myself, that's when I've got to put these things down on paper and actually hold myself accountable to them.
Interesting, is I feel like there are some areas of our life that we naturally, or maybe it's not even naturally, maybe it's just been instilled that you set goals around these things. And a lot of times that's related to career and related to making money. But I don't feel like very often we're challenged to make goals when it comes to our relationships or when it comes to our faith. And that's where I think a lot of times people just struggle to make progress in those areas. They feel stagnant in those areas. Those areas fall by the wayside because you may set these really amazing, smart goals when it comes to your career, but then you don't bring that same attention to your relationships, to your faith, to the things that really make you who you are. And that kind of goes back to, what we talked about earlier, Stephen, this idea that a lot of times our jobs and our careers, they get the best parts of us and we set goals related to those things, but then we don't have that same level of attention when it comes to our families and our faith. So how do you feel? I guess it sounds to me like you sort of reprioritized your life. And so how have those priorities looked? What are your priorities when it comes to your focus?
Yeah, priorities are a struggle every day for me. I have ideas of what need to be priorities, and then I have what are actually my priorities. When I reflect on how I'm treating my priorities, typically I realize I'm just a really selfish person, and my priorities are about me making me feel good. And so I'm really struggling to change that to where my priorities are about my family, my priorities are about my faith. And in fact, one thing I've been working towards this last year, and something I'm actually trying to figure out how to make, you mentioned a smart objective. Like, how do you make that a smart objective, is to really make God a priority. Because if he's my first priority, all this other stuff falls in line underneath it, right? Like if I have a good relationship with God, I should have a good relationship with my wife, and I should be a good father, because all of that follows being a good follower of Christ. And so, like, for me, that's my reprioritization, is trying to put that first, so that these other priorities that I know I need to be focusing on, and I do, I think, a pretty good job of, but they tend to shift and they tend to slide and to move up and down. If I can prioritize God first, I think those other priorities just naturally fall in line where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. And let me ask, did becoming a father play a major part in having that mindset or changing your mindset?
Absolutely. I grew up in a Christian home, and so a relationship with God is not something new to me, but this personal relationship with God as a father is completely new, because until I was a dad, until I was a father, I just didn't understand that love. I didn't understand that relationship, and like how you can, like, a lot of the questions people ask about God, like, well, how can a loving God allow bad things to happen? And like, that just makes more sense as a father, because we can tell our kids over and over, hey, don't do that, it'll hurt you. But if they continue to try to do it, at some point, you just have to say, okay, touch the hot stove, it's going to burn. And you just let them make that mistake. And I know that doesn't answer all the questions, but there's just so many things that make so much more sense as a father, and in understanding God's love for us. you just can't be as selfish as you were when you're a dad. You know, it takes you kind of beyond like, hey, it's all about me. It's all about my comfort, because for those first few years of having kids, there's not a lot of time for you. There's not a lot of time for your comfort. And I haven't mentioned this, but I have twins. Our first infants were two of them, and twins are high risk. There was a lot of extra work we had to put in. One of them had heart surgery right after he was born. And so there was like really no rest. And it was all about taking care of our kids, trying to do the bare minimum at work so I could keep my job, so I could have benefits for my kids. And yeah, it definitely takes you outside of yourself and automatically reprioritizes what your life's about.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I'm the recent dad of a 4-month-year-old little girl, and I feel like it's been said, and it's true, that you don't realize how selfish you are until you get married, and then you don't realize how selfish you are again until you have a kid. It totally changes the game. And I even just last night kind of got called out a little bit on that and did my natural thing where I'm a very logical person and tried to explain all the ways that I'm not being selfish, but then reflecting on it, sleeping on it some, it's like, okay, that I'm still guilty of it, still trying to work on that prioritization. And it's not easy. And it is something, again, I got to bring some specific focus around to, some goals around to.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a good point too, that it sounds a lot like your wife pointed that out to you. And
sure wasn't Riley.
But it's a really good point that when you're in a good relationship and you have that good foundation, which is like, it's important to have that before you have kids, you can hold each other accountable, because we have to remember that we're not the only ones learning how to not be selfish in that environment. And our wives, the mother, who has honestly so much more responsibility when it comes to kids, because just naturally speaking, we have to remember that they're on that same journey too. And it takes a good relationship to be able to have those conversations and to work through some of that, have grace for the other person, but also hold each other accountable and push each other to be better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Y'all are just trying to attack me here for all my selfish ways, I see. But you know what? I'm going to bed when I want tonight, which will be probably 9 o'clock. So I'm going to pull you a little away from the dad talk, because I can't really add input onto that without sounding like a weird hypocrite.
No, hold on now, Andrew. There's a widely circulated picture of Facebook of you being a little bit of a father figure to a child. So, I mean, you're not like totally outside the realm of dad life.
I'm not honestly sure which picture you're talking about. Do I know of this picture?
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah. It's you sitting at a table looking very non-amused with a kid who just looks like he thinks the world of you.
Oh yeah, that sounds probably accurate. All right, we might discuss that more later. We'll see. All right, so we skipped over some of our like intro questions we normally offer. So let's kick that out there for the people who, for some reason, would care about that. Where are you at on the introvert extrovert scale? And I'm stealing Daniel's favorite question. Do you know your Enneagram number?
So no, I don't know my Enneagram number. I'm definitely an extrovert, but I'm right on the line. So one of the things that I did appreciate about BNSF was every year they sent us for management training in Fort Worth at headquarters. And we always did some kind of like evaluation of yourself. And the Myers-Briggs came up a couple of years. And so I'm an ESTJ, which is an extrovert, but I'm right on the line of introvert extrovert. So like I really enjoy being with people. I tend to find myself gaining a lot of energy when I'm around people or having like really good discussions with someone. But I really enjoy my time alone too. Like I could easily go on a hike by myself all day and just feel completely rejuvenated at the end of the day. So I think I'm a good balance.
Okay, I have a follow-up, but first, ESTJ, that's extroverted. What is the S?
Sensing.
Is that sensing? That's right, because it's either intuitive, I think. What's the N? Intuitive or sensing? No, that's got to be the same thing. Then thinking.
Thinking and judging.
Yeah, I'm an int J, so I'm missing what is probably logic, whatever that S stands for. Sensing must be logic, because I've got the other one.
For the record, Andrew, it is intuition. I just wanted to see how much you would.
It's intuition. There we go. I knew it was. See, I had the reasoning behind it. I don't have the cool word. Intuition. Why would you put an N then? Why not an I?
Because I don't know. That'd be weird. EITJ. I don't like how that sounds.
Because an ES is better.
No, it is because of introvert.
Yeah.
See, this is why you have the S and I have the N. I can't reason that out. Okay, sorry everybody for Andrew's failures. So I went with you to Portland. I visited you in Portland briefly, and we kind of like to talk about cities a little bit. So what is your favorite thing about Portland? What was your favorite thing about Kansas City? Favorite place to live? What's it been like hopping to some major cities in the last 10 years?
Yeah. So actually, that was a big plus for me when I got on with BNSF, is they operate pretty much Chicago West. And I was like, man, I want to join this company and move around all over the place. Little did I know I would get stuck in Kansas City, but it turns out Kansas City was a great town. It's a couple million people, so it's a good size. Great sports teams, in case you weren't aware. I really enjoyed Kansas City. Surprisingly, it's not as flat as I expected when I took the job, because I took the job like sight unseen. I'd never been to Kansas City. I was definitely expecting like corn and wheat, West Kansas, but it's right on the edge of the Ozarks. It's a lot of like bluffs and hills and really pretty trees and lakes and rivers. And it's actually it's being revitalized. So there's a lot of cool art downtown. There's a lot of local bands, a lot of local breweries. And we really enjoyed it there, apart from me not being able to connect because of professional reasons. But the people we did connect with, we loved it. People were pretty genuine. People really loved being outdoors and staying active. And so I really enjoyed Kansas City. I would highly recommend it to anybody if you're just looking for a place to get away, or if you have an opportunity there. It's a good place to live, easy cost of living. Portland is quite a bit different. So Kansas City, you get that Midwest feel. Portland is like very Northwest, riot city. I'm sure you've seen all the news about protests and riots happening in Portland for over 100 days straight. It's definitely a different climate when it comes to like the social issues and how people view politics and things like that. But it's been really good. I love the people here in Oregon. They're very genuine people. You know where you stand with them, especially if they don't like you. But generally speaking, they're just good people. They enjoy the outdoors. They enjoy staying active, which is how I've gotten into hiking. But Portland is an amazing city. The food is incredible. There is a weird spin on every restaurant. Like if you just go to a restaurant, it's never just a burger. It's going to have some Asian flair to it, or a Mexican flair to it, or there's always some twist on it. And so it's always exciting to go out to eat somewhere new. We are known for Voodoo donuts because they're fantastic. There's a ton of cool donut places here. And then you just have the access to the outdoors. So I live on the west side of Portland. I can see the Coast Range from my house, which is the mountain range between us and the beach, essentially, which is a couple hours away. So I can get to the coast through the mountains there in a couple hours. I can drive east of Portland and be in the Cascades, and Mount Hood is right there. That's only a couple hours. Just right where I'm at, there's trails 20 minutes from my house in the hills. And so it's just really an incredible city where you have access to big city things, and you also have access to the great outdoors. It's the Pacific Northwest. You couldn't ask for more.
I have to ask because I want to see where you're at on this, and I don't want to offend you, but I have been to Voodoo Donuts and also Blue
Star?
Blue Star.
Yeah.
I liked Blue Star more. Am I crazy?
No, you're not. Generally speaking, I think Blue Star has better quality donuts, but you can't get what you get at Voodoo anywhere else. Nobody puts Captain Crunch and peanut butter and Oreos all in the same donut.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay. They've got the novelty factor. Blue Star's working the quality.
Yeah.
I need both in my life, so it's okay.
They're pretty close to each other, if I remember right.
They are. You could easily get from one to the other on a bike.
That is the most Portland thing I've ever heard.
Oh man. And then okay, so Kansas City, I also have to ask this because I feel like it's a unique city in that it's on the border between Missouri and Kansas. So one of my unique experiences there is I went to play Ultimate Frisbee, and we were playing on the Kansas side. I think we were staying on the Kansas side, but then we would always cross over to the Missouri side because you could buy liquor in the Walmarts there. Are there any other just like unique things of a city that is on a border between two states?
I think you hit it with the liquor. That's definitely what I would have said was like Thanksgiving Day, you need some liquor. Kansas won't sell it to you, but I could drive a mile east and go buy it in Missouri. And I guess they just want you to drive farther with alcohol in your car. It's pretty interesting. My wife worked in Kansas City, Missouri, and we lived on the Kansas side in a suburb. And so like taxes were an issue where she had to file income taxes in both states. And then we would get a refund from one state for what we paid in the other. And so, yeah, that was definitely weird. People just get confused, like where you live. Some people are like, oh, you live in Missouri. You're like, no, I live in Kansas. So there was just some confusion there. But yeah, I think the liquor thing, definitely the biggest like oddity about being on state lines is just the different laws. So while you were there, I hope you ate barbecue, because that was, and forgive me, all of my Texas friends, that was the best barbecue I've ever had in my life.
Dang, Houston boy,
I
shots
know.
fired. You should know better.
I'm going to get a tongue lashing next time I come home.
Don't let your parents listen to this.
I honestly do, and I unfortunately, one thing about frisbee trips is that you kind of just end up eating at like Taco Bell more than half the time because you're in college and you don't have money. So sadly, no, we did not have barbecue.
Because a crunch wrap burrito is the best thing to keep you in shape while you're running back and forth on a field all day.
Absolutely, absolutely. At a certain point, you just got to get calories in there for the lowest cost possible.
Yeah, that was another thing though, state line wise. If you ate in like Western Kansas or on the west side of the city, you could get some different barbecue than you eat on the east side of the city, because you kind of had that St. Louis influence on the Missouri side. And then on the Kansas side, you kind of had more of like an Oklahoma influence.
All right, we're going to go back to the trains one more time, mostly to see if we can get any more puns, but I mean, if we don't, that's fine as well. But I feel like the railroad and trains are something that for the most part we just take for granted. Like my only real memories is that it was exciting to see a train when on a road trip in Amarillo, because you had something besides flat earth and you could count the railroad cars. But when it comes to the railroads, have there been any major enhancements since the 1600s or whenever we had the Transcontinental Railroad?
Yes and no. Essentially, they're the same thing they were from the start, right? We have two pieces of steel with some heavy cars on top, and you just pull it from one place to the other. And that's the same general concept. But yeah, there's been some really cool improvements over the last, I would say, few decades. One of the things, obviously, we went from like steam locomotives to now diesel electric locomotives. And so that allows us to pull bigger, longer, heavier trains. In fact, before I left BNSF, the longest train that I was ever a part of building was 16,000 feet, which is, for those of you that don't know, is almost 3 miles.
Jeez.
Yeah, so that's pretty, honestly, from like a logistics perspective, it was useless, but it was like a cool marketing thing. You know, there's some cool stuff there, but I think the biggest improvement in trains lately has been positive train control, which is PTC. And so this is a requirement from the federal government for major freight railroads and passenger railroads to essentially create this system that is going to stop the train anytime there is an emergency, anytime if the train gets moving too fast and the engineer doesn't slow it down in time, it'll give him a warning to say, if you don't slow this train down, it's going to stop. And if he doesn't, it stops the train automatically. It can look ahead and see if there's anything that is in the trackway. And if it recognizes something in the trackway that shouldn't be there, then it'll stop the train before it gets there. That was coming out maybe my last year at BNSF was when they started turning all that stuff on. And even just in that little time, we saw several people who, like, their lives were saved because of it. Actually, in Amarillo, and actually it wasn't Amarillo, it was a town southwest of Amarillo, Hereford, I think. There was a grain elevator, so those big towers that they store grain in had a rail car sitting there in storage, and it rolled down onto the main track. And PTC, for this oncoming train, recognized that car rolled out on the track and stopped the train within a few hundred feet of it, rather than the engineer not knowing it was there until too late, plowing through it, possibly derailing the train and hurting our engineer and conductor. So it's a pretty cool system. The federal government's been requiring it, especially if you remember there was a derailment from Amtrak going to Seattle a few years ago. And that was definitely, it gave them some steam to say, you know what, we need to make this happen now. So huge investment by railroads.
There's the pun. Had to call that out there. Just in case anybody, Andrew, in case you missed it.
Y'all are dead to me. Dead, you hear.
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest change lately. What you're seeing a lot of now is a move towards intermodal. So those trains you see that aren't just like old box cars, but they're actual containers. Those are pulled off of ships. They're placed on trains. And then when they get to their final destination, they pull them off a train and put them on a truck. And honestly, that's where most of railroads are going this day, is just because it's easy to move that container off of one vehicle, put it on another vehicle, and you can get it right to the final destination without having a building built on the rail line.
Making like the last mile easier.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, last mile is the terminology we use. That's, I think, where we're heading. Where I work in transit, we are all electric. So our trains have the wires that run above them, and then the pantograph that goes up and touches that wire, and it pulls 750 volts, and which is a lot of electricity, in case you were wondering. So we're running that way. And so you actually see a lot of like commuter trains starting to be electrified too.
And so for the big trains, those aren't electrified yet just because the horsepower that's required you can't get from an electric motor yet?
Well, actually, the motors themselves are electric. So it's a diesel electric locomotive. So the locomotive runs on diesel, and then it provides electrical power to these motors on usually 4 of the axles on a locomotive.
That's a little hybrid action going on.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks for all the info. Before we go deeper, we'll start wrapping up. But first, do you have any stories that you want to share? Because we like to ask, and you never know what comes up.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite fatherhood stories was when I realized that I did not have the patience for kids. And so I have twins, like I mentioned. And when we were still in Kansas City, we had just moved into this new house, had white carpet and white walls in the formal living room. And so my wife and I are in the other room, our kids are in there playing, and we're in the midst of potty training, which is trying for any adult. And especially when you have 2 kids you're trying to potty train. And one of the ways you can do that is by not putting a diaper on them. You just let them free ball, and they recognize that they don't have anything on, hopefully, and they don't go to the bathroom. So we hear this, uh-oh, from the other room. So we go in there. One of the twins has pooped on the wall, and it slid down the wall to the carpet. And then the other one was standing in it. At that point, like my wife, it doesn't bother her at all. I don't know what it is about moms, but their kids' poop doesn't bother them. For me, I was mortified. I was like frozen. I didn't know what to do, like a deer in the headlights. And so she starts like yelling at me, like, get the kids, get them in the shower. And so I grabbed the kids covered in poop.
By the throat.
Yeah. Carry them up to the shower. And so, like I mentioned, this is a new house. The people who owned it before were an elderly couple who I don't think they ever used this bathroom anymore. And so it has a removable shower head, and I try to get the shower head to turn on because there's like a little knob to turn it on from the faucet, and I can't get the shower head to turn on. So I can't get the kids washed off the poop that's just all over them at this point. And they're like screaming and crying, and there's 2 of them. They're like trying to climb out. My wife's yelling at me to like get them clean and get her, like gloves to clean up the floor. And I think at that point, I just realized I have a lot to learn about like my limits and controlling my temper, and that there are things that are just going to push my patience, and there's nothing you can do about that. So
Daniel is looking into the crystal ball in 6 months.
I'm just thanking the Lord that my walls aren't white and we've got hardwood floors, so it's a little better.
This is a lesson for me not to have children, is how I'm taking this. So you're at 3 now, right?
I am at 3. So I have the twins. So yeah, I got 2 for 1. And then the third one, my wife was like, you know what? I want to have just a normal pregnancy, feel what it's like to have a baby without being on bed rest and like being up all night with 2 different kids. And so we had another kid, and he's wonderful. Definitely the third child. He gets away with everything.
I can't believe you fell for that line that she fed you, but whatever.
It took a little convincing, but we got there.
Hey, honey, I don't really want another kid. I just want to see what it's like. And you're like, oh, yeah, we could just try this out. And the next thing you're like, wait a second. These things are permanent.
I was definitely down for practicing.
That's good. I hope Bailey doesn't listen to this. I'm going to get in trouble somehow. Let's bring it back to the one story that the 3 of us share. What were you thinking when you did the Mordor Trail? Because a lot of people, hopefully, that are listening have done Mordor. And anybody that's not listening has an open invite to reach out to me, and I will take them to Mordor. So what is Mordor, and what was so special about it for you? And what do you think about Daniel and me after that moment?
This is just Andrew trying to find a way to embarrass me, by the way, so don't fall for his bait.
Yeah, no, Mordor I was really excited about because I didn't know that kind of trail existed in Texas. I grew up in Houston, which is just as flat, but with less rocks and opportunity to climb things. And I was pretty excited, except for after about 500 yards, and my legs were killing me because the first part of that hike is horrible.
It's real steep.
It's real steep and real loose. But yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect because you talked about this trail that looks like Mordor. You get to the top and then there's this crevice and you climb down in it. And I was like, man, I don't know. Am I going to die? I don't know if I trust Andrew this much. But it turned out that's still one of my favorite trails. I love that trail. Just it has so many opportunities to fall and hurt yourself and a great reward at the end. I do remember the time that we took a whole group of people on it and they were not hikers and we absolutely terrified them.
I think I carried one.
I think you did carry
girls over
a
my
girl
shoulder
across.
because they stopped on the bridge at the top and I was like, we're not doing this right now. Like we still have half the hike to go. And they're like, we're just going to sit here. I was like, nope, just pick them up.
But yeah, I mean, as far as Daniel, I had heard about you, Daniel, and here you were like Andrew's old friend, and here I am, Andrew's new friend. And I was like, man, is this going to be like tension filled? Are we fighting over the same man?
I did find a knife in the bathroom, so fate was trying to push us towards something.
You know, that's a good place for a knife fight. I'm just saying, like, if the wound doesn't kill you, the fall will. So, like, there's definitely going to be a clear-cut winner.
I was excited to get to do something with other people who were willing to take that chance and take that risk. So I'm always down. If someone wants to go and do something a little over the edge and get our adrenaline up, hey, I'm on board.
I like it. I think that death-defying canyons and climbs and all that kind of stuff is a good stopping place. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on. Like everybody else that has come on, I know you are having to take time out of your day, time out of your family's day, and everything that goes along with that. So Daniel and I both truly appreciate you being willing to come on and talk to us about things that, you know, can be uncomfortable and a little vulnerability there. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to talk. And like I said, you're one of my closest friends, Andrew, and I've certainly gained a lot from you and a lot from your experience and what you and Daniel wrote and what you'll talk about. Happy to share. Hopefully it was a little insightful for someone.
I hope so too. I bet it will be, because there's a lot of people that you can't not learn from this. It's a new experience. I don't know anybody else who's done the things you've done. So hopefully somebody's listening like, hey, now I know about Trainmasters and twins and, you know, not to trust Andrew and Daniel in the canyon. So I dig it. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening yet again on this episode. We're really glad you guys are sticking with us on this. So thank you all, and we look forward to connecting with you soon.